thank you everyone for coming today. I know you probably have a number of briefings by other ETBs as well, so thanks very much for freeing up the time to come to the briefing on KCETB. So we've 4 sections to go through. So the first one will just be a brief introduction on KCETB, then we'll go through the QA procedures, external authentication, and just a conclusion, a bit of a recap on what we've gone through. So for an introduction to KCETB, currently these are kind of the main centres that we would normally have for EA. So our full-time provision would be our 2 PLCs. So in Carlow, we have Carlow Institute, and in Kilkenny, we have the College of Further Education, Kilkenny, which previously would have been Ormond College. And Ormond also has an outreach centre out in Grennan, so they've Grennan Mill and Grennan Equestrian. Then we have our 2 VTOSs, so one based in Carlow, one based in Kilkenny. Youth Reach Carlow sometimes has QQI awards for EA, and our training service provision, which would be all our second providers, which could have part-time and full-time provision. And then in the part-time division, we have our Back to Education in Carlow and Kilkenny, and our Adult Learning Service in Carlow and Kilkenny. So the centres that are marked with the stars, they're the ones that are going through the June RAP and EA authentication. So they are the centres that I'm assuming that you're all kind of booked to EA. So it'll be one of those centres, or I'm not sure if maybe 1 or 2 you might have more than one centre. The location of our centres, you'll be able to see on this map here. It kind of shows there is a spread around, but for the majority of you, when you're EAing, it'll either be in Carlow Town or Kilkenny City, except if anyone is booked for Ormond, the outreach in Grennan. So other than that, it would be kind of Carlow and Kilkenny. The QA department, we have moved since probably the last month. So we were based over where VTOS was in Kilkenny, but we've moved to Danville Business Park. So that's our address there. It's 10 Danville Business Park, Ring Road, Kilkenny. Our phone number has stayed the same. Our email address is the same, and our website is the same. So the website, as you can see there, is kcetbqa.ie. So that's our public-facing website. The image there is what you'll see when you go to that website. And any of our policies and wider information is there. We do have a QA portal, which is internal, and that's where we share our module descriptors and resources and that with teachers and tutors. But the KCETB QA website, that's where we kind of store information for EAs as well. So the email that would have gone out to you from Siobhan with the different forms, when you click on those forms, you're downloading them from our website, our public website. Our QA procedures. So I suppose the QA procedures for authentication is governed by, for us, 4 documents. So we have 2 QQI documents. They're the core statutory QA guidelines and the policy on quality assurance. I'm sure you're all familiar with the 2 documents. In the presentation that we'll send out as well, when the video is going up, there are links here. So if you do click on the image in the presentation, it'll link you directly to those documents. So, and the main thing that they focus on really is the independence and externality of EA, and EAs being subject matter experts within the quality assurance system. So this is a really important aspect of the assessment process and ensures credibility to the awards being achieved by the learners, that there is an external check on the centres for the awards that are being achieved by the learners. We also have our guidelines for completing external authentication, and that's on our website on the authentication page. And basically that's what we're going through within this PowerPoint. So we'll be going through that document. And the 4th and final document is our quality assurance policies and procedures for the fair and consistent assessment of learners, or we call it our assessment policy. And this is located under our policies on our website too. And there is a section in that that's relevant to EA. So it talks about the processes for EAing within KCETB. And the email that Siobhan would have sent out to you when you were booking with the different links, the link D2 is the document, is the section, I suppose, of our assessment policy that relates to EAs. So you would have that in your email. But again, we'll go through part of that in this presentation too, in relation to kind of our sampling strategy and what we expect of EAs and what you can expect of us too. So the KCETB quality assurance procedures is, I'm sure it's similar to other centres in that, we have our assessment corrections where our internal assessor corrects the learning work and results are recorded on marking sheets. Once that's all done and the learner evidence is all pulled together, then we have the internal verification and all the outcomes and any, I suppose, anything that needs to be checked or needs to be fixed before the EA is all recorded on the EA report. And then we have our external authentication. So that's where all come in, where we have our independent authentication of a sample of the learner evidence that has been put forward by the centres. And then we have our EA report, where you will fill in the outcomes of your EA visit and make the different recommendations and list any good practice. And again, if you have any grade changes or whether you're proposing grade changes for any of the results. Once that's done, we bring all the EA reports to a joint wrap. So in KCETB, we bring all of the centres together that went through that authentication window, and each of the centres presents their EA reports, and we go through all the outcomes and we go through all the recommendations as a group. So the 5 different centres that are going through the authentication window will be brought together for that, and that way we can learn from each other. And we can learn from the reports that you as EAs have filled in for us and the recommendations that come from that. So each centre will follow these 4 kind of steps within our process here in KCETB. Then for the external authentication within KCETB, I suppose this is the way it's done here. We have a central system. So in KCETB, the QA office books the EAs for all of the centres. And that way, I suppose there's externality as well in booking the EAs. So I am Maura. Just saying, if you want to turn off your camera for the recording, it'd be great. And we'll be having questions then at the end that we'll be able to bring you in. Thanks, Maura. So as I said, the KCETB department appoints the EAs, and we only appoint EAs that have been trained and briefed for the role. So EAs as EAs would all have been selected from Direxa, the new database that's from ETBI. So all of you would have gone through the training with ETBI and be listed on that database. So we only book EAs who are listed on that database. And we try as much as possible as well to ensure that the EAs have the subject matter expertise for the different fields of learning that were put forward by the centres, to make sure that we get, I suppose, the best reports that we can get back so that we can improve the service that we offer within KCETB and make sure that we can improve things going forward for learners. So under the when, we have our timetable here, so we tend to kind of work back from the QQI submission date. So we go back from that to our RAP provisional. So we give enough time that once the results have gone through RAP, that the learners have time to appeal the results before the QQI submission. So that's why we kind of go back slightly more than 2 weeks for our provisional RAP. And then we go back from that to when the EA needs to be completed by. So it gives the EAs time to get the reports in, and also gives the centres time to review the reports before the RAP. And again, if we need to have any kind of pre-RAP meetings with centres, if there's kind of grade changes, so that we can discuss that, so it helps out on the RAP day. And then we have our EA request date. So we ask centres to send in their EA request by a certain date, so that the QA office has time to book EAs and make sure that we're getting EAs who are familiar and subject matter experts within those areas. And then once we've selected somebody from Direxa, I suppose we contact yourselves and Siobhan, who does all of that, and she gets all the paperwork together and sends out an email to you with all of the information in it, including GDPR agreements and the EA service agreements. So for us, that's 2 documents, but when it comes out to you, it comes just in one Adobe file that you click on and sign. So it's important that we get those documents back, because they are the agreement, I suppose, between ourselves and yourselves. And then it also is the agreement that, in terms of GDPR, that you agree not to retain any of the information from learners. And if you are doing anything online and you have to download something, that you do remove it from your system. So you're agreeing to that to make sure that the learner's information stays confidential and safe. This is, I suppose, the email that kind of goes out to you from Siobhan. So there's a lot of documentation within that. There's the new employee commencement form. So that's the commencement form that is now being used by all ETBs around the country, so that you should be able to kind of just use one form. Once it's filled in, you only need to change the ETB name if you're working with another ETB, but it's a standard form now. So that would need to be completed prior to EA if you're not already on our system. If you're on our system, you only need to fill it in if your bank account details have changed. Then once the EA is complete, we ask for the EA report to be submitted to us within 2 days of the EA, so that we have enough time then to look at it before our wrap. We're on version 3 of our EA report, so it's important that you do use the link in this email to bring down the report so that you're getting the most up-to-date report, and not, if you've done EA work from us before, to use an old report you may have downloaded. So it's always important to use the links here. Then in terms of claims, we have the 3 claim forms. So we have the C1, which is the day rate claim form. We have the EA travel and subsistence claim form and the indemnity declaration form. So just say that there's 2 payment systems in KCETB. So C1 is an EA claim form, so that's for the day rate. And currently the day rate is €250. I know ETBI are currently negotiating to try and get a higher pay rate for EAs, but at the moment the rate is set at €250 for the day. So when that comes in, that's processed by Siobhan here, and then it would be paid to you. The travel and subsistence is processed by head office and finance, so it's a separate process. So what it might happen then, it might mean that you get paid your day rate. You could get paid that before you get paid your travel and subsistence. So it's not often that both of them are paid together, because they're through 2 different systems. And just to say, this year it's a bit different with the travel and subsistence, because our finance department, under the direction from revenue, have been told that travel and subsistence is now subject to tax. And I know ETBI are in talks with the minister on this, but the current direction that we have from revenue, or that our finance department have, is that they have to tax travel and subsistence claims as well. So just so that you're aware of that, because I don't know if anybody would need to kind of stay over, but what that would mean then is that if you did have a claim for a hotel stay or something like that, that would be subject to tax. So it's just to make sure that you're aware of that if you're booking anything. And then lastly, the D forms are just for your information. So you would have got an Excel sheet in the email, which would outline the workload that you've agreed to EA, sorry. The D2, again, as I said, is our EA procedures from our assessment policy. You should have got a D3, which is a PDF, which would show you your centre location. So it'd be an image of the building, the contact details of the person you have to contact. And then you would also have got the travel and subsistence rates, so that you know kind of what you should be claiming for. What we asked before the EA visit from our centres is that they will prepare the following, so that they'll have the relevant module descriptors and program information if appropriate. So that will be there for you. That all assessment instruments and supporting documentation, so briefs, marking schemes, solutions, papers, that they're all there. That the assessment plans and timetables are there if necessary. That all the learner evidence is there for you to take your sample from, that the learner assessment results are recorded on the results sheet, that the list of the assessors are there, internal verification report is there, and the past EA report is there. So depending on where you go, like if you're in one of the PLCs, you should be getting the past EA report of the program that you are EAing. If you go to another centre where it's done more on a modular basis, you should hopefully you should get the past EA report of that centre. So it might not be as specific to the modules you're doing, but it would be the last EA report of that centre. And we do expect centres to have that available to you as EAs. And taken from the QQI policy and quality assurance guidelines, saying the role of the external authenticator, it's a provider-owned quality assurance system that makes appropriate use of external persons who are independent of the provider, who are expertly qualified to make relevant national and international comparisons. So this, I suppose, sums up what we expect of EAs, that EAs are subject matter experts who can go through the learner evidence, make sure that the evidence that's being put forward by the centre and the learner meets the national standards, and that the learners are being graded and getting the results that they deserve to be getting. So the external authentication event and visit, as I said, the EA should be a subject matter expert. We're asking to review marking against the criteria and national standard, be able to recommend grade changes. And it shouldn't be a monitor, just kind of check. It shouldn't be a repeat IV. It really is focusing on moderating the grades and checking. So we do ask when you're looking at grades that you use your judgment to look at the boundaries between the bands in the grades. So kind of looking at results that are kind of close between referred and pass, kind of in between pass and merit and distinction. So you're checking those borderline grades and making sure that the results that the learners obtain, that they do meet the standard and they are what the learner should have achieved. So you're going to be reviewing the supporting documents, reviewing the learner's work, reviewing the marking sheets, and it's really important that you communicate with the centre contact. So I suppose QA book the EAs, but once the EAs are booked and once you've been sent the contact details of your contact person and they've been sent your details, then the link is kind of made between the centre and yourselves, and communication and starts between the centre and yourselves. So it's really important that when you go into a centre that you meet with the contact person, that they're there to meet you as well, and that you kind of can introduce yourselves to each other. And then likewise at the end of the day when you're leaving, that there's kind of a summary meeting, or you kind of have a quick chat to say how it's gone and maybe give some updates before the report comes in. We ask as well that you follow KCETB's sampling strategy. So I'll show that next. So our sampling strategy basically is that if there's 1 to 3 learners, that all the portfolios must be sampled. If there's 4 to 9 learners, then 3 portfolios must be viewed. And then when there's 10 or more, we take 30% rounded up. So seeing there, if a module had 11 learners, a 30% sample would be 3.3. So we round this up to 4. So we never round down. So if it comes to 4.1, then we ask for a sample of 5. And we ask that you follow this sample, because I know in previous year reports we might have seen that there was 3 learners and maybe only 1 learner was looked at, when really all 3 should have been looked at within that according to our sampling strategy. So it is important that the sampling strategy is followed. Sometimes you might want to extend the sample size. So we just say that if you do wish to extend the sample size, so for example, again, there where there was 11 learners and the sample is 4, but you've decided the sample is 6, that it just needs to be justified and documented, saying that, well, I did notice some issues here that made me want to kind of look a bit further into more of the results or more of the learners. So I sampled a further 2 learners. So it's just to note why you went above the sample, but that's fine once it's noted that we have it recorded as to why. The EA report, as I said, it's version 3.0, so that can be got from the link in the email. Again, if you have any issues with any of the links, just contact us and we can send you the files directly by email. So within the EA report, what we're looking for is observations on the assessment, again, and consistency with national standards, evidence of consideration of previous external authentication recommendations, any good practice that you may have observed while you were there and going through the learner evidence, any recommendations you may have for improvements within the centre, just ensuring that learning outcomes are covered within the assessments that are there, that making sure that all learning outcomes are covered under those assessments. If there's any grade changes, that you note them and that you note the learner. So either by, noting the learner by initials and just letting us know how many grade changes and why. And then a recommendation on whether the learner results should be submitted for certification. So the option will be yes to submit them for certification, no, or yes pending grade changes. So moving on, this is what's on our front page of our EA report. It kind of gives examples of areas that we asked to be included in the EA report. So again, a lot of this is stuff that I was saying already, just confirming that the grading decision is being upheld and that if a recommendation for change is being made, the reason why. Establishing if the learner evidence meets the required standards. So when you're putting in your comments, good practice observed, recommendations again for improvements, learning outcomes are covered, that the appropriate assessment techniques have been applied, that the content and assessment material, like assessment briefs, marking sheets, outline solutions, so any comments that you may have on those, and comments in relation to kind of totting and grading errors. So we ask that, they're kind of things that we would be expecting to see in an EA report if they come up, that they're the kind of things that you might put in your comments. We've some examples of areas that we think probably should not be in the EA report. So one is comments on the quality of teaching, because I suppose if we're not in the classroom with the teachers when they're teaching, it's hard to make it's hard to make kind of comments on the quality of the teaching. Again, the center resources, because it's something, again, that you probably wouldn't be familiar with what resources are in the center. Hospitality, again, when you're sending in your EA report, it's perfectly fine within the email to, if you felt that the hospitality was good, to thank the center for their hospitality, but we ask that maybe not to include it in the report, but yeah, definitely include it in the email when you're sending the report, and any content not relevant to authentication. We're also asking, because it did come up last year, just around learner PPS numbers, to not include any PPS numbers in EA reports, just to use learner initials. So if there's a grade change within a certain module, that you just put the learner initials and say that, I'm recommending that this learner be upgraded to a distinction, or that it was being downgraded to pass for these reasons. We some of the feedback as well in the RAP last year was, as I said, the emphasis on sampling. So just making sure that you stick to the sampling plan as per KCETB, and that you do sample the minimum required to be sampled. And if you go above the sample, just to note the reason why. Then for us to explain to you about feedback, I suppose on our briefs, we have a section for feedback, but the feedback is, I suppose, it's summative feedback. So it's feedback on the assessment grade. So the tutor or teacher will fill in their rationale behind the grade for the learner. But that's not, I suppose, the only place that there is feedback, but it might be one of the few places where you see it, because there would also be feedback informally during class. There might be feedback on briefs and feedback giving in one-to-one meetings with learners. But within the brief that you see, it is, I suppose, feedback on the grade result. And just to note as well that some centres don't print provisional results. We don't make it a requirement. We actually think it's probably better that the provisional results are not printed out. They should be available to you, but it might be digitally, again, because with learner PPS numbers and everything, it's just to try and make sure that nothing kind of gets printed out that could potentially lead to a data breach. But some centres may print them out, but if they do, they should have, I suppose, the PPS numbers redacted. And again, with signatures, because if you need to sign provisional result sheets, and that can all be done online. So digital signatures are accepted within KCETB, and within Adobe Reader, just the basic version, the fill and sign tool will allow you to sign any document that's there without needing the paid version. We also have the national grid of level indicators, which again, I'm sure you're all familiar with. So this will be what you're kind of looking at. So if you're looking at level 5 awards, that you're benchmarking the awards learners are getting against this to make sure that there's consistency in the standards of what the learners are achieving. And this shows a kind of a good indicator of the standard of work that the learner achieves. So you're looking to see, do the learners have the required knowledge, skills, and competencies reflective of the program or module that they were undertaking. So this is a good guide to look at those standards. So with communication, again, within KCETB, as we're saying, arrangements are made by QA with yourselves. There's a nominated contact person in each KCETB centre, so you should have just one port of call when you go in to the centre, and that's that one key person in that centre that you're dealing with for the time of your visit. That if there are any issues, that if you can highlight them promptly to your contact person. So when you go in, if you're looking and you realise, okay, there seems to be some documentation missing, or there's some assessment material missing, or some equipment missing that you need, that if you can bring that to the attention of your contact person as soon as possible, so it can be resolved very quickly. So hopefully it doesn't delay any of the work that you're doing. That if there are any grade changes that you're recommending, that you do highlight them to your contact person as well. And that when you're leaving, that you give kind of a brief review or conclusion on the EA visit. So again, so if there's any issues or concerns that can be, I suppose, clarified or rectified during the visit, or if you have any queries or questions, the contact person is your key person. And that way they might be able to deal with any of the issues that come up and rectify them there and then, so that you have a better experience when you're EAing. This year, I think most of the authentication is happening in centre. So again, saying to link with your centre contact, that when you do complete your EA report, you can submit that electronically. So you will email it to both QA and to, I suppose, the centre contact person. So when it goes to the centre contact person, they have the EA report directly from yourselves, and then also for QA, as so as being external to the centre, that we get the EA report sent directly, but you can send it in one email. So you can just send it to the centre contact person and CC ourselves in the same email, so that we both get copies of the EA report. Just to let you know that depending on the centre you go to, evidence may be displayed in different formats. So if you go to, say, VITAS Kilkenny, you probably get most of your learner evidence primarily would be, I suppose, hard copy paper. When you go to, say, Ormond College, it's most of the evidence is probably going to be digital through Teams. If you go to Carlow Institute, most of the evidence is probably going to be digital as well through Moodle. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why they like people in centres, then they can support with that, with accessing Moodle and making sure that you can access all of the information. So even though it's in centre, it can be a mix between kind of, I suppose, paper and digital evidence that you'll be looking at, but your contact person will be there to direct you and to support you in accessing all the documentation that you need. And again, if you have any issues, they're the person to talk to. So again, saying just to keep communications channels open with the centre contact person, and they'll be there for the entirety of your EA visit. So in conclusion, just to recap, that KCETB QA procedures and QQI guidelines are available. They're on, the links are on our website. They're also available as part of this QA presentation. So when we send this out, the links will be here in the presentation for you to click on. The key documents and information are also on our website. Again, saying while EA arrangements are made by QA, once the centre contact is made and that link is made, then they're the person of call for you to go, because I suppose QA don't have access to the learner information. We don't have access to the teachers and kind of what has happened within the different courses. So it is important that any I suppose any questions you have in relation to the learner portfolios, that they are made with your contact person. And then again, any issues that arise during the EA process, to direct them to your centre contact person. And lastly, that the video and presentation will be available on the website. So hopefully I will have the video up tomorrow, but once it is up, I'll send you all an email and let you know. And again, once you are finished the EA and you have your claims all ready, then if you submit all of your claims to the QA office, to Siobhan, because it's the QA office that will process any of the payments. So the day rate, as I said, will be paid and processed through the QA office, and your travel and subsistence will be forwarded to the finance department in head office, and they'll process that, but it'll be forwarded by QA. So it's important not to submit your claims to the centre that you're EAing in, because some of the centres, once you're finished, will be kind of closing for the summer. So if you send your claims there, they'll probably sit there till September. So it is really important that the claims come in to the QA office, and you can submit them by email to Siobhan, but just to ensure as well that you do sign them, because our finance department will need original signatures on the form. So it should be okay to sign them and then scan them and email them to us. Okay. Then lastly, again, is our contact details. So again, you can contact Siobhan mostly, but again, if you have any queries, you can contact myself too. Our postal address and our email address is there, and it'll all be in the slides when we send them to you. And just want to thank you for attending the briefing, because I know that you probably have a few different briefings with other ETBs, and I know you're all very busy, but thank you very much for taking on work. And I know for some of you, I recognize names there, so you've done work for us for a number of years. So thank you very much for coming back and doing more work with us again this year, and look forward to working with you. And again, just to say with your EA report, to have it in within 2 days of finishing, so that we can kind of go through them before our wrap and submit your claim forms as early as possible as well for payment.